Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the KPC podcast. I'm Carson Turner.
And I'm Hannah Thurman.
Today we have not a whole lot of stories, but definitely some interesting topics we want to go into. There was a shooting in New York yesterday, and we wanted to talk about the cultural impact of the Roseanne reboot. But Hannah has a story about a teacher walkout first. So go ahead and start off, Hannah.
All right. So recently, after the West Virginia or Virginia walkouts, now Oklahoma teachers and Kentucky teachers are also walking out. And this is an article that the Washington Post had on the Oklahoma governor, Mary Fallon, who has recently compared the teachers that are on strike to a teenage kid that wants a better car. And she has been making remarks this whole time. So we're just going to talk about that. So hundreds of thousands of students are unable to go to class because schools are closed currently in Oklahoma. Fallon told a CBS correspondent that she suspected outside groups like Antifa were involved. Antifa is a anti-fascist.
Yeah.
No, that's what it stands for, right?
Yeah,
yes. So that's one of her comments.
What did she say about Antifa?
That she thinks that this isn't just it's just not the teachers that were pushing this agenda. She thinks that outside groups were involved. And so she thinks that Antifa is coming in and saying, I don't know, they have some control over it. She's from Oklahoma, so you don't really know what they're thinking down there.
Antifa, that stuff's no joke. I got a PDF of their handbook, and I was reading through it because I had heard that they would use violence to silence fascists, and I was like, there's no way. If you read the book, maybe they had really good intentions, but no. In the book, they even advocate for violence. They say, there's one section, they were like, but hang on, isn't it weird to use violence against opposing views? Isn't that kind of a fascistic thing to do? And they were like, well, since we're right, we are able to do it. And they use, obviously, Trump supporters. Those are Nazis, not conservatives, and even fans of Milo Yiannopoulos, which he wasn't even famous for being conservative. He was famous for being a free speech advocate. But according to Antifa, if you support him, they have the right to attack you because you're a Nazi. It's insane. It was crazy.
Well, yeah, that's the article that I read.
Yeah.
They had people in correspondence out at the walkouts, and one of the correspondents asked a teacher, and I think he was a middle school teacher, and he was like, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah.
What? I mean, they're teachers.
Yeah.
All they want is more pay. And Oklahoma is actually ranked 49th. In 2016, they were ranked 49th for teacher pay.
Whoa.
So currently about 20% of the school districts in Oklahoma have moved to 4-day school weeks. They can't because they cannot afford to keep the lights on for 5.
Wow.
This article also reported that Oklahoma schools have lost about 30% of their funding over the past decade. They can't purchase textbooks or get repairs for the textbooks. And so the teachers are asking for a $10,000 raise, and the lawmakers they met because they were in session, and they approved to raise the salary for educators by $6,100 but a year, and support staff by $1,250. But since the teachers are saying it's just not enough, Fallon signed that bill, and then this is my favorite comment from her, which really made me drop my jaw. She said she signed the bill and then said at a news conference, I hope they can come up here and say thank you on Monday and then go back to the classrooms.
Oof.
Yeah. I mean, that would anger me.
Yeah.
I mean, it angered me, and I'm not a teacher. My mom's a teacher. I texted her, and I'm kind of thinking that this is going to grow. I think it's going to hit a lot more states. So I asked my mom if there's any rumblings in Minnesota of walkouts, and she was like, no, I don't think so, because Minnesota, we have really great teacher unions apparently, and apparently they get paid fairly well for teacher salary. But I'm interested to see where this goes, and if they get that $10,000 raise, it's going to be, I mean, I don't think this governor really wants to budge considering what she's been saying.
Yeah. Well, I know that a good solution for Oklahoma is if they implemented a driver's ed program so teachers could teach students driver's ed, because maybe they have that program. I don't know, because no one in Oklahoma knows how to drive. So hopefully they can introduce that and get teachers more hours.
Yeah,
another way to give them some more pay. Yeah, that's interesting.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see what happens with that one. I'm sure. I mean, they can't. They're gonna have to give them to them, because I don't think these teachers are. They're not gonna just go, take the loss and then go back to class.
Yeah.
I think this is their life. So they can't. I mean, like, they have to get 2 jobs, and they went to school and college to get a degree in this. And I think that we should be taking care of our teachers a lot more than we do. And
especially if they're going to college for it and a degree, there should be some form of maneuverability, or other ways to incentivize teachers to make more money or just more opportunities. Because
they're teaching our youth. They're a very big part of every student's life.
I think a problem is that they kind of just, teaching is just one job. It's really hard unless you talk to certain students to find the good teachers and the bad teachers. They either just become administrators or they're just a teacher for their whole life. I think there should be some kind of in-between where they can be promoted and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree completely.
But,
all right.
Speaking of the Midwest, Roseanne, the hit comedy TV show, originally ended 21 years ago. It had 9 seasons. They rebooted the series a couple weeks ago. They're on their 3rd episode. So I wanted to talk about, we're going to break this up into 2 parts. The first thing I want to talk about is just, the life of Roseanne, because she's a very interesting person. And then after that, I'm going to actually give my thoughts on the show that I had watched. But first, I got to drink some water. So, okay. So, as I have here, it says, so Roseanne Barr is an American actress and comedian. So she got her start in media doing stand-up and was featured on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson in 1985. And within 3 years of that first exposure to being on television, she had her own TV show. She started Roseanne, which ran for 9 seasons. That's super, super, super successful for any TV show to go past like the 3-season mark. And one thing that people are talking about is the politicization, the politics in the new Roseanne reboot. And the old show actually tackled a lot of subjects. A lot of sitcoms, they are known for tackling subjects. So I have I Love Lucy was the first show to feature a female lead. Family Matters it didn't shy away from tackling racial issues, even though it was a family comedy show. And Roseanne was the same way. So I've got a couple episodes for some examples. So season 6, episode 18 had a same-sex kiss between Roseanne and another character. I don't know if they were the first TV show to do that, but that was controversial for the time. Another episode talked about domestic abuse, which, isn't really talked about and wasn't talked about in media, not to mention, especially sitcoms. And then there was the episode where one of the characters was thinking about getting an abortion. So yeah, even though it was a Midwestern show for the working class, it did not shy away from a lot of social issues. And what's interesting about Roseanne, so she ran for president in 2012. She started her own party, the Green Tea Party, and her politics are kind of interesting. So she considers herself liberal. Her show, the first run of Roseanne, was much more liberal, and but she is not a fan of the politically correct culture. She voted for Trump because she wanted to change for the culture. And but she's still a very big liberal. She's even adopted some socialist ideas. I saw in an interview she wasn't opposed to that, which is why she did not go very far in her presidential run. But yeah, I didn't know that she was very politically active, and I didn't know she voted for Trump even though she was liberal. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, she must be very moderate then, you would think, but
to go in between, vote in between.
Yeah.
So,
I've never watched that show. I mean, I've heard of it, and so I saw a bunch of stuff on Twitter, but I don't.
And the next part, after your story, I'll go into the new show and how it is and people are responding to it. But
perfect.
Yeah.
Looking forward to that. Well, on to the next story. There was another shooting of a black man on Wednesday in New York City. He was a 35-year-old man named Saheed Vassell, And CNN reported that the officers received numerous 911 calls of a man that was aiming what was described as a silver firearm towards people that were walking around in Brooklyn. So officers arrived on the scene, and the suspect allegedly pointed the object at the officers, to which the officers, there were 4 of them, responded by discharging their weapons and ending up killing Vassell, in which you showed me before we started this podcast, but there's actually video now video from it must be security cameras, right? Because the officers were not wearing body cameras, and he was in a stance that looked like he was aiming a gun. So this man was pronounced dead on arrival when he got to the hospital. There are 10 rounds between the 4 officers. The chief of department, Terrence A. Monahan, said at a news conference. So what was interesting to me and different for this one is that, it comes 2 weeks after the killing of Stephon Clark, who was also allegedly pointing a gun at officers, but it was a cell phone, or he was reaching for his cell phone. But his father, not Stephon Clark's, but Vassell's father, told the police station that this man didn't have access to guns because he has bipolar disorder. And, we were talking about it earlier. This one's different because it's a pipe, and it did kind of have the form of a gun. I will give that.
It looked like a gun,
right? And now, before seeing the pictures that you showed me of him actually being in that stance, there were parts where it's like, okay, there were no body cameras that the cops were wearing. He couldn't have gotten a gun. Like, was there even any? How is there going to be discussion in that situation? What's your name? I guess I get that, but it was, there's 4 of them and 10 rounds between 4 officers. That's shooting to kill. We were also talking about why don't just shoot him in the foot or something, or shoot him in the hand where he's holding the pipe. This one, I haven't seen any justice for, there's usually that after these shootings because they are so, bizarre. It was a cell phone rather than a gun. But if this one were to go to court, like so many of them have, I don't think that it would be.
Yeah, the cops would be able to. I think because there are so many factors in every instance where a police officer shoots someone, whether they're armed or not. Even I have a few questions with. So I mean, the blanket statement I want to say is I don't think Stephon or this other guy should have died, right? We all agree that they did not deserve to die. But in the shooting from Stephon, one thing that I kind of was weary about is there were so many officers after him. So the people who called the cops saying that this guy was breaking into windows I think they already kind of had the idea, okay, if there's 5 cops, we're going after this guy. Obviously, he's armed, and I also think not necessarily the object that he had, but the gesture he made to show he had the object is what scared the police officers into thinking that he was armed. But I think there are certain things you could do to work around that. Like I mentioned, maybe training to shoot them somewhere like the hand or the foot, which is extremely difficult, especially if it's a moving target.
Right.
Not easy at all. But I also know there was a Joe Rogan podcast where there was a former police officer where he said that they don't do target practice or anything like that. And I don't know if that's true for every single police district in America. I don't think it is, but I also think rankings depend on it a lot. Like if you're part of the SWAT team, you're probably at the shooting range every day.
Right.
So, and with this shooting too, these cops were just told there's a guy who's armed and we need you to go stop him. They couldn't have had time to look what was in his hand to double check. They couldn't have had time to ask what his name was and look up if whether or not he was even allowed to own a gun. But there were also a couple of interesting instances is that some of the police officers, they don't know the officers who shot him. They haven't revealed that information yet, but the police department knew about this guy. He not only had bipolar, but he also had some form of a mental illness. He didn't have a job. He would just kind of do odd jobs to make some money. I think he lived with his parents too, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know. There's just so many weird things about it, and I've learned that with every shooting, when you look into it, it's not, the media kind of likes to play this whole, it's so simple, racism, that's why it happened. But when you look into things, you can go, okay, there's racism could very well be a factor, but look at all these other factors too, and I think those should be taken into account. But
I think with a majority of the other shootings, there was definitely like racial profiling going on 100%. But this one, I don't feel that way. But we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah.
On a lighter note.
Yeah. So back onto the Roseanne topic. So for starters, the ratings of Roseanne were completely out of the water. I think Will and Grace had a reboot, and Roseanne's reboot basically doubled it. There's 3 episodes on Hulu so far, and I also think it's on TV. But the big thing about it is Roseanne and her husband are Trump supporters, and this is kind of the first time this isn't the first time. This is the first time in a while since conservatives have been portrayed in TV in a positive way and not in a fascistic neo-Nazi form. I know actually because Tim Allen had a show, Last Man Standing, where he played a conservative, but ABC, because of the election, they just canceled the show. It was one of the most watched shows, and everyone liked it, but I guess they didn't want a bad look, so they just canceled it. And there wasn't anything scary about it. And also there were a couple things in the Roseanne show where Roseanne would say something pro-Trumpish, and then the audience would kind of start to boo, and it's like, oh my God, quit being a baby. Like, go home. You're so offended by this. But what I liked a lot about the show is that, one, it was actually funny. Sitcoms normally aren't that funny to me because the jokes are so forced, and that doesn't happen in Roseanne. She's a very intelligent comedian. She knows exactly what she's doing. People are already writing articles about how it's such an awful show, and it's much more center. If anything, it's more left than center. But they kind of, like I said, episode 1 is about the election. Roseanne talks about how she voted for Trump, and her sister voted for Jill Stein, but Roseanne thought she voted for Hillary. So there's like this huge clash, and really represents the political divide that our country has and how it's torn people apart. But then at the end, it shows the absurdity of, wow, you guys were arguing over nothing. And so I like that. That was a much more neutral tone. Episode 2 took a more liberal theme where it talked about Roseanne's grandson. He's a boy. He wears girl clothes. So they were kind of tackling that issue. Should you wear girl clothes or whatever? And
in a recent
this was
wow.
So that was definitely a much more liberal theme. And then episode 3, it kind of had a more traditional conservative theme where it was the argument of, should you be a quote-unquote cool parent and let your kids kind of do whatever you want, or should you be stricter on them and understand that kids are stupid? And then, of course, they favor the traditional kids are stupid, you need to be a good parent type thing. So, and the other thing, too, is Roseanne and her husband are the only conservative people. Everyone else is liberal. So it's not even a conservative show. It's just 2 characters happen to be conservative, but they do play into the politics a lot. But it's funny because Roseanne, she understands both sides. She's a Trump supporter, she's anti-PC, so she kind of understands how to make the people on the right laugh, but she's also a liberal, so she knows how to make those people laugh as well. So I like it because one of my problems with late night shows is that they claim that they're making jokes about Donald Trump, but it's like so obvious that they hate him.
Oh, 100%.
And they're just like
100%.
Yeah. And it's not even funny because it's like you're just being mean to him, and
they're making fun of him.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, he doesn't really help himself in that case,
right?
Because he does
but it's like
a lot of things. But
yeah, it's like, we get it. You don't like Trump. Where this show is poking fun at both sides, which actually makes it genuinely funny. And
it's good that there's both sides. That, I think that's what we were talking about on Monday.
Yeah.
That, there should be 2 sides instead of like, this is all, like, I'm glad that it's not, okay, everyone on this show is conservative and we're only going to talk about conservative things.
Exactly. Which, I don't know. It's I don't know what I was going to say. I just really like it. I mean, it's a funny show. I'm really terrible at watching TV shows, but I had no problem sitting through 3 episodes, and I'm going to watch more of it, especially if they take this more neutral approach. And that's the thing. I wouldn't even want a fully right-wing sitcom to balance out all the left-wing sitcoms. I think just one that's more balance between both of them to point out the absurdities in both sides, because both sides have really stupid arguments as much as they have really smart arguments. But I think our media has really tailored to the left side, and she was on Jimmy Kimmel, and she was even saying things about him, because she was like, yeah, well, you know, I'm a liberal, but I'm not your liberal, because you guys are so left that you don't even
refuse to listen to anyone.
And then of course Kimmel like kind of laughed. He's like, "Oh, I don't know if I do that." And it's like, dude, you like held your kid up as a prop and was like, "If we get rid of Obamacare, this son will die." Like, you did some crazy crap like that.
I'm looking into. I looked up Roseanne while you were speaking, and I found in a Washington Post article, because apparently that's all I read. She posted where she appeared on a cover of a Jewish humor magazine in 2009. And so I clicked on the link going to it.
Yeah.
And so it's a humor magazine, and she's dressed as Hitler.
Yeah, yeah.
Holding burnt cookies.
I saw that on Twitter because someone was like, "Can you believe this Nazi has a show?" And it's like, dude, how stupid are you? That guy. I think he's Vanity Fairs. Yeah, that's what it said. He's been fired from like every job this past week because he's been bullying Kyle Cashew, that Parkland survivor.
No way.
Yeah, he was saying things like, "Quit attacking these children." Then he proceeded to attack Kyle, and there's this thing where their DMs were posted and it got really heated in the DMs, but he's like lost all of his jobs.
Wow.
Yeah, that guy's crazy. Kirk Eichenwald, he's an idiot.
But I mean, that picture is... I'm confused because it was on a Jewish humor magazine.
Yeah.
And Barr apparently is Jewish. That's what this article's saying.
Jewish.
So I just think that's so distasteful.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the Holocaust can ever be funny or have jokes surrounding it.
Well, I think...
But I guess that's the...
Yeah, I mean, if she's Jewish and she's able to find...
Going for?
Yeah, I mean, if she's able to find humor in tragedy... Because something that a lot of people do when they experience tragedy is they'll make jokes about it. So they're not remembering how awful this event was. So if they sprinkle humor over it, it makes them look at it in a lighter subject. And if it was featured in a Jewish magazine,
that's
so they
why
were
I'm
all
confused,
on board.
Right.
Yeah. So I think... Because people have been using that picture to paint her as, you know, like an alt-right neo-Nazi, but...
It was a Jewish magazine.
Yeah, if it's a Jewish magazine, she's Jewish herself. Obviously, they were all in on the joke. Not every Jew is going to think that's funny. Not every non-Jew is going to think that's funny, but that's part of being a comedian, is you have to push the boundary and walk as close to the line as you can without crossing it. And depending on who you are, she either crossed it or didn't. But the solution is to not... post screenshots of that and say, "Look at this Nazi," because you're anti-humor basically. So, because I think comedy is all about experimentation, and I think this show, this reboot, was a huge experiment, but it also showed that people are so sick of one-sided TV shows, one-sided media in general, and it was such a refresh for them to take a risk and actually show the good in both sides and the bad in both sides. So. Yeah, it's a great show, and I look forward to seeing more of it. But
yeah, I should watch it actually. All right. Well, I think that's. Do you have anything more?
Nope. I think that's all we've got. So, everyone, thanks for tuning in. We will see you on Monday with our next episode of the KPC podcast. See you later.
Thanks.